Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic with the one and only David Regal. David is an incredible magician in every sense of the word. Not only is his sleight of hand amazing, his trick creation is amazing, but his writing is incredible too. And in this episode, we go through all of it. And not only that, but he's had a life of not only magic, but writing in many other places for TV shows and, most famously and recently, the Carbonaro Effect. So we talked about creating magic, approaching magic. We talked about writing magic for TV, writing for TV, and so much more. This was an action-packed episode with an incredible magician, and I hope you love it as much as I did. Here it is, the one and only David Regal. David, how are you?
I'm reaching a personal peak. Thank you, Jonah.
That's good. Good to have you here at a personal peak. How have the last couple of years been? With respect to the whole lockdown thing, change of life.
I got to be honest. I realize I'm not the only person to say this, but the Regals love the pandemic. I live in Burbank. I was working very hard right up to COVID. And so everything slowed down and I started going, this feels pretty good. So I realized for a lot of people, it's a terrible, terrible problem. But for the Regals, knock on wood, everything's good.
Well, that is good to hear. I think eventually we're going to get back to talking about right now and how we've all kind of changed a little bit. But I want to zoom all the way back to the beginning. How did you get started in magic? How did you kind of get bit by the bug?
Part of the story of how I got into magic is very typical, and a little bit is atypical. The typical part is I got the magic set as a kid, and I did every trick in that magic set, doing little shows for my family, and then started doing kids shows. And on my mother's side, it's almost like they're a part of some social experiment because there's so many children. There's always 4-year-olds. Once I became a tween. And so I was doing kid shows from, tween age years. And as every year went by, the 4-year-olds stayed 4. They just kept breeding on my mother's side. And so I had all these kids always and to do shows for whatever the mighty fee was that I charged, $20 or $25. I don't remember. But I had tricks like stratospheres that's behind you. And I came up with all these fanciful stories for the kids shows. I said they were cookies in a crazy fanciful land. And in that land, you could always just take any color cookie you wanted. And somehow that became stratospheres. But so that's very typical. Kids shows, my parents, assuming my parents had nothing better to do with their lives than load my many suitcases full of crap and a folding wooden table to wherever I was performing that weekend. And I did this very frequently. I became like a mantra to these kids. They didn't call me David or Cousin David. It was David Regal. Is David Regal going to come? We're having David Regal. And that was a really wonderful, empowering feeling. I remember that feeling vividly because it gave me a sense of being a person and a place in the world. And that happened at a young age. So it was a very strong, positive reinforcement I got from, being interested in magic and having that bug, which, bites us for whatever reason. And in Boston, I don't know if you know this, I grew up in the Newton area. And in downtown Boston, there were 3 joke/magic shops. So even when I'm 12 years old, I'm taking the trolley, we called it, to these shops in Boston, walking from one to the other and, seeing all these demonstrations and becoming friendly with some of the proprietors, the ones that didn't scare me, I became friendly with for years. And it became my regular thing. So I was very lucky in that respect. But when I said there was an atypical part, the thing that's atypical was really a stroke of luck. My dad, I was never that close to my dad. He was not a person you got close to. He was one of these personalities that people eventually moved away from. But he was on school committee, and I think through school committee he met someone who lived on our street where we used to live, Homer Street in Newton, Massachusetts. He said, David, this guy's into magic. I said, maybe, he can teach you things, or you can go meet him, or he said, send him over, something like that. And I don't know if I was apprehensive or not at that young age, but I went. And this man showed me and my buddy, another guy into magic that I grew up with, a bunch of his tricks. He was a hobbyist, so he was like the greatest magician you've ever seen. Would say, oh, he flashed that, or, oh, I see how that works. But he did the greatest thing for me, this man. He said, I also have these books on magic. Why don't you take some of these books? And I'm pretty young now. Was I 13 or 14 by now? I took these books home with me. And these books were like sacks, sleight of hand, a couple of volumes of Tarbell out of order, and Al Baker's Ways and Means. And that book, that made a big difference in my life, because now I'm an adult. It made a huge difference because, first of all, Al Baker's now my hero. I never got to see him perform, but I understand he was a very funny and talented performer. But as a magician, oh my God, just a brilliant and fascinating man. He came up with, the deck that cuts itself, we now call it the haunted deck. But if you read how he actually used to perform it, it's eye-opening in his book, and other effects, many effects. Half the book was stuff like, oh, I can make this out of my dad's, shirt cardboard. You remember he had his shirts laundered and they used to put cardboard in there, and you can make things. Right? And half the book is that, oh, I could do this, I could do that. And half the book was what seemed to me to be joke explanations. Oh, this can't be a real method. This is, I guess, a book or half that's jokes. It's like you can seem like an amazing, mind reader if you memorize the Saturday Evening Post. Like, well, that's not a method. Memorizing isn't a method. That's, I don't know, it's got to be a joke. Just as when you're young and you read the method for the classic version of card to pocket or card to wallet, the classic version is you put the card in your wallet. What? That's not a method. Where's the magic? Yes, we make wallets it makes it easier to put in that card than if there wasn't that space. But basically, the method is you put the card in the wallet. And you're trying to create, a feeling of magical transportation when with your hand, you're doing the opposite of magical transportation. You're putting the card in the wallet. Well, half of Al Baker's book was, to me, at that age, like that. And it's a huge lesson that I relearn myself constantly. And we all know people in magic that don't ever learn that lesson, that method and effect sometimes have very little in common. I mean, obviously, there's better methods and worse methods for that particular effect or that particular, appearance, the arena or the venue, or with the people, that you're working with. There might be different methods you choose, but sometimes the most miraculous things are brought about by mundane methods or methods that require practice. But if you're to look at them like card to wallet, it seems like the opposite of what you'd want. You'd want some crazy robot on the table, grabbing the card, putting it, reaching into your pocket and doing it. And a lot of people, especially in mentalism, buy these enormously elaborate methods that have nothing to do with effect, but create, I think, for some people, a sense of protection, of being ironclad.
I think as magicians, there's a couple things that's hard to do. One is it's really hard to be a spectator again. It's really hard. And one of the things that's hard to do is what you're talking about, is to unmarry method and effect. Because when we go to lectures, we're just tickled by the most strange and complicated method, not necessarily complicated, but ingenious, unique because it falls in the gap between our knowledge. That's what tickles us so much. And it's very hard to divorce that and, look at magic and say, what's the effect here? What is the effect here? How can magicians right now start using that? I know you've written about this idea of separating method and effect a lot. How can magicians use that and not, if they're 5, 10, 15 years in magic, not get, swept up in exciting methods? Or should we? Or is that maybe not the right way to look at this?
There's nothing bad about wanting, the best method. It's just not, doesn't make you a great magician. It just makes you like every other magician, because we all want the best method. No one ever goes out and says, you know what, for this, I want the third best method. So I wanted to start off with a good method, get a little shitty, then become okay at the end. No one says that.
Right.
So it's good to want the best method. However, divorcing it from effect and understanding that it's really serving the effect. The effect is God. And whatever that effect is, whether it's the dream effect or the plot that you like, you then have to find the best method for you, the place, the people. And we've seen, or maybe you haven't seen it, but, they make a card to envelope. And I've seen this thing. It's a table, and inside there's like a carousel, and it finds the card and puts it in an envelope. It's sitting on the table. Well, it's probably the most complicated method. And it is fun to look at these crazy methods, but what is the method providing? And if you really ask yourself what the method is providing, in that case, if it works, this crazy table I'm describing, what did it provide? Well, it provided ease if it's working, because now I'm just reaching in my pocket and pushing a remote control, but did it make the effect better? No, maybe it made it easier, it made it more expensive. Okay, maybe it made it easier, but it also made it chancier, because what if the battery doesn't work? What if the thing dies one day? We've all seen magicians relying on methods that fail. And the great thing about sleight of hand is it's very dependable. It sounds like a crazy thing, because when you learn sleight of hand, it seems like everything that's difficult seems at first out of your reach. And then you should learn to do this and learn to do that. You really understand that, we human beings are like having, a supercomputer, because, if the machine's reaching for a card and the little thing that grabs isn't grabbing today, well, what's going to happen? But, if you go to Palm and your hand was dry that day and nothing ended up in your hand, you talk for a second and do it again. We're supercomputers. And so using this amazing machine that is us actually is a pretty good idea for a lot of methods. But yeah, divorcing it is super important, or really trying to understand what it's providing.
Yeah, it tends to be the more things we add to hopefully improve the method potentially adds a lot more negatives, right? A lot of the times it adds a lot, like you were talking about with that table, like there's a lot of things we now have to look out for. It now can't move around. It's not, so we also want to tend to do like as least as necessary, like the method that's, maybe as simple as necessary. That's one of the things that I'm hearing as well from this.
I think we all share a lot in common. Everyone into magic. We don't all have the same judgment, but very often we'll watch someone else do an effect or watch it on video. And we'll go, oh, it's all really good up to that part. And that part's it's too bad he has to move his hand there. And when we see the thing that strikes us as a bad part, and again, it may be a different part for different people, and for other people that they're not sensitive to it at all. But once we have an opinion about a part that we feel is unfortunate, well, now we have a plan of action. I wonder if it'd be possible to get rid of that unfortunate moment. And sometimes you can't get rid of it, but you come up with something that basically turns it invisible. In other words, now when it happens, boy, everyone seems to miss it. And you see that in card work all the time, because in routines, very often, there are things that have to be done. Say add a card or steal a card. And, you really separate the men from the boys or the women from the girls when you see these people who've worked out the details. And, whenever I manage to do it, I give myself a little applause. I go, okay, you did good here, not bad. Because that's like the greatest thing. I think magic in general improves in these increments. And that's what I used to love about hanging out at Rubens, the place in New York where magicians got together every Saturday, because I was in my 20s then and getting back into magic, because in college, it fell by the wayside. I was busy with other things, uh, and got back into it super hard, got back into magic super hard after school. Um, and I'm hanging around Rubens. And all of a sudden, even though, yeah, look, you know how magicians are when they get together. And, oh, that's the way I do it. Give me the cards. No, 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 you're doing it the wrong way. There's a lot of that. But there's also a sense of a meritocracy, because if a 16-year-old kid walked into the back of Rubens and he had a false cut that was a little bit different, you know what? It's going to be about 30 people gather around that kid's table saying, show me that again. And I thought that was cool, because in magic, if something gets a little bit better, generally it's acknowledged by everybody. Yeah, when someone decided to do this, that was an improvement. And because most things are improvements by increments, not everything's this giant, brand new idea or principle, though we have those too. Most things are increments. That's this beautiful little, trail of breadcrumbs we have in magic, where it's like, okay, I like this. I like this. Can something be done here? And those little, improvements come from everywhere. They really do.
I think that's a great answer and a great way to think about looking at magic and saying, what can I, that part, like you said, that part where you go, eat that I don't like. That's a great way to motivate yourself to have some work to do. We spoke about some of the books that got you into it. And you talked a little bit about spending time at Rubens. I know you spent a lot of time around a lot of magicians. Who were some of the magicians who, in person you spent a lot of time with that made a huge impact on your sleight of hand and the way you do magic now?
The interesting thing about magic is different people are the best at doing certain things. So when people say, who's the best magician? It's like, you know what? There's certain people I love to see doing this. Other people I love seeing doing that. And I think in magic, we are all reawakened sometimes by the right performer. Another way in which I was very lucky is after college, I started working at the Magic Townhouse, relearning how to do a kid show, because, I was just trying to make some regular money. And I worked in their shop there. And they did shows for adults with some young but very talented magicians from the New York scene. And Peter Samuelson, Eric DeCamps, Mary Yedid, Peter Kugasian, and others, many other people. And this was a high level of skill. And Dick Brooks had performed there too. He was a little older, but and Dorothy Dietrich, the two of them ran the place. So I would see not just good magicians, I'd see really strong effects from magic's repertoire. It wasn't the first time I saw good effects. When I was a teenager, I used to run around doing magic on street corners in Boston with this organization where in the summers they're trying to, help people and kids mostly in, low-income areas, and then help seniors that were in old age homes. And I was part of this program, would go around doing magic. Well, the other magician I worked with was a more skillful magician than me, Carl Sagan's son, Dorian Sagan. And he showed me a lot of good effects. He showed me the Benson sponge ball routine with the bowl, the Benson bowl routine. And it fooled me so badly. He did it very well. And then he taught me a mock explanation. And I knew he was full of crap, but, okay. But then he introduced me to Vernon's Cutting the Aces from Stars of Magic, which is one of the great card effects. So I learned that at a very early age. And then when I got older and saw these magicians like Peter Kugasian and Mary Yedid, Peter Samuelson, Eric DeCamps, doing great tricks from the repertoire, wow. And Jeff Justice was there too, very skillful, Jeff Justice. And they're doing, close-up magic that was very contemporary for its time, but also well chosen. Between them all, They had good taste. And so you're seeing good magic. And, it's interesting if you have to say, what's the one thing you need to be a good magician? Well, you need a lot of things, but it's easy to say the one critical thing you need is sound judgment. Why do you say that? Well, yeah, you need skills, uh, manual skills to perform. Even if you're doing box illusions on a stage, you need physical skills to perform. And by the way, I'm totally impressed with a stage magician doing illusions that makes it seem like magic, because that's going to be the hardest venue in which to make something seem like magic. You're on a stage with a box. Doesn't seem like magic right off the bat. Seems like you're a guy with a box, but there's some phenomenally skillful illusionists that make that situation magical. Close up, much easier to seem magical. If I put a coin in the hand and it vanishes, it seems incredible to people right there. And you don't have to, work across 30 rows or more to get that sensation of magic across. It's really overt in the world of close-up. But why do I say judgment's important? Because if you practice enough, you can learn skills. So practice gives you skills. If you want to do illusions, well, you're going to need some money. Yeah. So now I have the money to buy these props. But how do you get judgment? You can't really work it physically to create, more muscle to your judgment. You can't buy it and own it. Judgment is this rare thing. And the reason a lot of performers are as good as they are is they have extraordinary judgment as to what makes a good effect, and then what are the beats of this effect. How do I sell the different beats that I want to sell in this effect? The really good performers all have good judgment, or have found people, and together the group has created good judgment. Without good judgment, you don't end up with good magic. You just don't. And the rarest thing and the most precious thing, though, yes, you need skills. And if you're going to be, doing something that costs money to produce, you need the money. But what you need more than both those other things is judgment.
I love the way you're putting it, with judgment. I was thinking, like, it sounds like you really have to be able to make difficult decisions. You have to be able to make difficult decisions. Even for when you were just describing that illusionist, that stage illusionist, you have a bunch of money and you have to decide what to spend it on, right? And like, there's nothing worse than buying a giant, magicians, close-up magicians, we've bought a prop and go, oh, darn, waste of like, $60. This coin is not a great gimmick or whatever. But how different to buy a giant illusion and go, I couldn't do it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. It's not fooling. It's not, so what you're saying there is true. And the more that the further we get down in this path, the more decisions like this we have to make. The more times we have to, make judgment calls in our magic. One thing that I was really curious about is you mentioned, returning back to magic. And I know that you've done magic among other things like writing and even, playing piano. I'd love to hear a little bit about the journey of some of the different things that you've done, like, the way that you thought about magic as a career or not, and through your whole life.
Well, I don't know if you'll like the answer to this question, but for a very long time, I tried to let magic be my love, a sort of passionate obsession. And I really valued having that in my life, because when you're a writer, at least for me, you're always auditioning. It's always, what's the next job? What's the next job? Sometimes you get lucky, and some people get on a show for 10 years. I was never that lucky. I had, some 2 and 3 year jobs, but you're generally always looking for the next thing. Like when you're an actor, you're generally looking for the next thing. Or if you have a family concerned about, how am I going to make a living because this show is going to go down, and what's the next one? And so because that produced anxiety, I loved having magic, which is a very positive outlet for me creatively and personally. I really valued being able to, just have this thing that was just pure pleasure. But as things happen, it was surprising to me that there were several coincidences where some job would fall through or it'd have some need. And magic, oh look, that sort of saved my ass. Being able to, whether it was do a magic lecture, or, I had this idea for a product to put out, or a book, and it really was supremely helpful as I negotiated being a writer. Every once in a while, there'd be a year where I thought I was going to be working and I wasn't working, and magic really helped me. And as it's helping me, I'm still concerned that it would, somehow get polluted. And if it became the thing that I was looking to make money, it wouldn't be the thing I loved. Because I think we've all seen magicians that don't seem to be enjoying their being a magician. And that's the saddest in the world. What a crazy occupation to pick if you don't love it. You really should love it, or you're going to be the sad magician. We've all seen the sad magicians. Wow, you made the wrong turn, Buster. So I didn't look to it to make a living, but with the Carbonaro effect, it turned out I was there from the beginning, from the pilot, writing and producing the show, and it was both things I loved. It was comedy and magic. This is not an easy job, by the way. We weren't shooting in LA ever, and it kept everyone physically beaten up. Everyone was beaten up. At the end of a season, people on the the magic team, half my age, would be posting, "I need to sleep for a month," and I think, I'm twice your age. How do you think I feel? It's a very difficult job, but for me, when am I ever going to find that combination of things again? It's this very strong comedy show, very strong magic show, this crazy little beast of a show. And those two things came together, and I'm very happy they did. And Michael Carbonaro is one of my great friends now. I love him like you love a brother, and so it turned out to be this wonderful and surprising thing.
I'd love to hear a little more about that show. It's really an incredible. There's a couple pieces of magical television that will mark this era. Every decade there's a couple pieces of magical things that sneak through to the world of television. And in this time right now, it is Fool Us and the Carbonaro Effect, and maybe there's a couple others, but those are the two biggest ones in my head that are like super magical and people know them and they're on TV. I guess America's Got Talent as well, but only to a small.
This is a big time for magic.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, I've seen huge change, but in your lifetime too, you've seen huge change.
I'd love to hear, some of the ways that you go into thinking about this show and how it's different, because it's not magic, but it's magical. And I'm very curious if there's like rules or any things like that you set yourselves up for creating things for this show, because it's a scene that doesn't really exist in the magic world, right? Somebody comes in there and don't know they're a spectator. It's a different relationship. So I'm curious to how you step into this, because over the course of the years, it's probably hundreds of instances, right, that have been filmed.
Literally hundreds of bits.
Yeah, and that didn't exist.
We did over 100
10
episodes. Each one, yeah.
Wow, and it didn't exist. Like 5-10 years ago. So I'd love to hear about how you think about going into these bits and these scenes.
Well, first, credit where credit's due. That idea of Michael being, behind the counter somewhere with a hidden camera started on The Tonight Show as a segment. It was successful there, and then it was sort of exploded and magnified to be its own show. And so it got sold, and then they were making the pilot, and that's when I joined. But having said that, every time I've done magic for TV, and I have done it in a few different ways, the producers basically have a strange idea of what magic is. They think you go to a store and you just buy it and you do it and that's it. And it isn't like that. And, we're going to turn a dog into a cat. Go to the store, get the dog to cat trick. Okay. It sounds crazy to say that, but that's exactly what it's like. They have no idea. And I'm there with the production company, and we're talking and this and that, and they're calling it a magic show over and over. And this is a magic show, it's a magic show. And I said, this isn't a magic show. And it was like the Scooby-Doo noise, like, it's like, and I said, this show is a strange day in the life of the Mark. The Mark is what we call the person to whom, the bit is being done, or on whom. It's a strange day in the life of the Mark, and we use magic to create that strange day. And that pronouncement was not really a brave pronouncement because it's so true. In a magic show, first of all, you have a magician. With Michael, who is a magician, in the context of the piece, he's never a magician. He's either your coworker or the shopkeeper or your boss or whatever he is, but he's never playing the role of a magician. In a magic show, there are also tricks. You have a magician, and the premise is, I'm going to show you tricks. And the Carbonara effect, there is no magic. Everything has to seem real in the real world. I mean, the game of the show is, with a wink to the viewer, we're going to use magic skills to create this strange day. But in the context of the piece and the reality of the piece, if the Mark says, oh, you're doing a magic trick, which is, by the way, what everyone in the audience experiences in a magic show, show me a magic trick. But in our case, we can't have that. Our job is to convince them that this strange occurrence is happening for real. And if you think about that, that eliminates about 95% of the magic in a magic catalog.
And the presentations.
Well, the presentations made the show possible, because when you say, what are the rules? Eventually, we're getting pitches from the magic team and other people not in the magic team, magic people. And sometimes very often we're getting trick pitches. And I say, eventually the rule became, you can pitch any magic effect, but you also have to pitch what the Mark is believing is happening, because that's the show. What is the Mark believing is happening? The Mark's believing that, boom. And the simple pieces, that's a very easy question to answer. The simple pieces are, oh, here's a counter in a store, and here's a product with unique attribute. Oh, that's very easy to answer that question. They think there's a way to turn broccoli into cauliflower through, this machine or this process, whatever the simple thing is. And I would say the meat and potatoes of the show is a lot of those smaller pieces, but we also did bigger, more audacious concepts. And those are the ones that required a lot of thought and a lot of, you're writing, obviously, for the piece. What is happening in the piece? Michael's playing what role? Does he know what's going on? Is he surprised by what's going on? You're really writing what the actor, Michael, is going through. But you're also writing for an actor that doesn't know they're an actor. The Mark, in these situations, these more elaborate bits we did, has a part to play. And our job is to get the actor, the Mark actor, to play his or her role without them knowing they're playing their role. And in some of our more intricate pieces, they had to do a series of things and believe it was their own, free will, but go from there to look there and decide to do that of their own volition. We had to control that. And that became very interesting. And we got pretty good at it because we were good at figuring out what the pieces should be that could lead them, stair-step them up to a desired result. And also, Michael being, as supernaturally gifted as he is. When I say supernaturally gifted, I mean in a multifaceted way. Yes, he's very, very good at performing magic, technically performing the magic without seeming guilty. But also, he seemed without guile as a human being. He was an actor who, in that context, knew how to bring things down to a place of absolute believability. And if you see him on stage, and I have nothing to do with his stage show, which is excellent. If you see him on stage, he's projecting a personality to 2,000 people. And yet he knows how to modulate that for TV, which is right up here, and that mark that's right up here. And he's just so believable, and you trust him. He's, got that superpower that we learn to exploit and push. And we learned how to write these, intricate segments in a way that we get people off balance. And when I say off balance, what I mean is, let's say it's an audacious thing. We want to convince someone that it's a funny story. Michael writes about this. He did an intro for my book, Interpreting Magic. And he talked about this one bit that we planned to do for years. All the bits didn't happen when we had the idea. Sometimes, we can't get the space. We can't do it for another reason. What was the bit? The bit started, it was Michael's idea. Let's dig up a time capsule with impossible stuff in it. Like 30 years ago, someone predicted iPhones. That was the idea. Good idea. Well, it'd be great if we could. And then it's like, could we have, a town center with like some heavy machinery that looks like it's just dug up the asphalt and it's a big thing these questions are not easy to answer, and they take a lot of thought. This one took years of thought, because we're looking for, how do we frame this for television where you're going to get that sensation across, and also for the mark has to believe they really are digging up this time capsule. Well, okay, time's going by, and I say, like the next year, it'd be better if, can we make the mark believe that, I think we'd already decided, let's have some kid, predict these things with crayon, some kids drawing. I said, it'd be great if we could make the mark remember that kid who never existed. In other words, we can find out where the mark went to school and make that be part of our method, because, methods can be anything. And this trick ended up with a multitude of methods. So if we can find out where they went to school, then it could be a time capsule from their school. And I said, there's that kid that was always in the back. Let's create some kid Timmy that was in the back. And Michael, in the bit, you'll make this guy remember Timmy. This guy never existed. But I wonder if we could do that, because that'd be pretty cool. Have this mark. I remember that kid. He was always hanging out by himself in the back. He never existed. Well, that'd be fun. We never did the trick that year. The next year, I said, Michael, I wonder if we can make the mark think he drew this stuff. And that became a very interesting challenge, because how do you do that? I said, he'll never remember because it didn't happen. I said, let's make him think he forgot. And that became the challenge. And we did it. We had this guy helping Michael. Michael was in the guise of a landscaper in a Chicago park. And we should move this time capsule because we're putting a new statue here or something. And in the course of the scene, which may or may not be available online, because a lot of the clips are online. But the idea of the scene is, here's this guy. He thinks he's an assistant to the landscaper. And they dig up this time capsule. I went to that school, says the mark. And it's, of course, the right year. We did some homework. But now this mark is deciding to do things in the context of the scene, live. Like, they're going to put a new statue here. What do you think the statue should be of? Says Michael to the mark. And the mark decides what he thinks the statue should be. Then the mark makes other decisions, like where to plant certain flowers and what colors they should be. So all this stuff is going on. And now we're opening, this time capsule is underground. And needless to say, you open it up, and it's, dated perfectly for it to be this guy's class. And you're going through and you see this crayon drawing, a series of drawings signed in a childish scrawl by, it's the mark's name, and everything is predicted. Stuff that's happening, a wedding that we see happening in the park is predicted, where his flowers are predicted. The statue is everything. It's like one after another. And by the end of it, this guy's saying, I remember making this drawing. We actually convinced this guy he was a 7-year-old psychic. And that was thrilling and took an enormous amount of labor. But it's thrilling for us too, because it's not like we're in the van headed for the park thinking, yeah, this is going to work. We're thinking the opposite. We're going, is there even a chance in hell this is going to work? And that didn't just happen with that bit. There's probably 20, 30 bits we did, if not more, where we're in the van going, there's no way. But, everyone on the magic team really loved magic. And some of these bits we were all heavily involved live, making what needs to happen, and as well as Michael. And that teamwork and the determination and the sense of never say die made some of these unlikely events happen. So there's a lot of credit to go around. But yeah, we worked at it. We put writing into it. Michael put, his brilliance into it. And the fact that Michael was able to seem as trustworthy as he seemed to these people was a giant part of it. It wasn't the totality of it. But without that, we would be dead. It would be like a tripod missing a leg. Boom, it would just fall over.
The two things that are just coming to my mind about this, the first is really how talented, Michael really is. He's a real actor, he's a real actor in a way that, most magicians are not, I was going to say not capable of, but are just not, he's able to be so many different things in so many really, truly, not just believable ways, but, leading, like you're describing, leading people on to do these incredible, to do these incredible things.
Great magicians have conviction. My favorite magician is Darren Brown. And when you see him perform, especially live, you're just blown away by this man's absolute conviction to, these premises. And certainly Michael has that too in a different way. Absolute conviction. I won't say there weren't bad days when, everyone's a little down. Not everything is easy. And Michael, we all had good days and bad days. But what surprised me more than once, and I'm going to tell you something, you're going to think it's impossible. You're going to think it's impossible. We're there doing some bit, and I'm there with headsets on. I'm listening to it because, there's video set up different places. And the guy goes, the Mark is in the middle of a bit. And Mark goes, is this like a prank? Am I on TV? Is this some like TV prank show? And I take off the headsets. I go walk over to craft services to make myself a bite, because now we have to wait for another Mark to show up. And what time is it? And they're eating. And someone says, David, the bit's still going. I go, no. David, the bit is still going. Michael talked the guy out of it. We had a Mark busting us. And Michael, again, not just once, not just twice, many times, through his absolute conviction, talked them out of it. Oh, I wish this was a prank show. Boy, I wouldn't be so freaked out right now. So he'd talk him out of it, and happened over and over again.
The second thing that comes to mind about this is about how rewarding it must be. It's like a mega magic trick, and doing them hundreds of times, because it's not like some of them, obviously a lot of magic sometimes has incredible reactions, but because this happens in people's world and the rug of life is pulled out from under them and they don't know, in magic, we talk a lot about this like safe space that is the theater, and like they don't have that. They don't have that in the world. Like a dog is being squished and, like all these different things are happening. It must be really rewarding to create something that's so large and I think creates a response that is, equivalent.
We all love that. And that's the drug, that's like, I was in an improv group for many years, and, you get to be a laugh for. The laugh is the drug. And here, successfully pulling these things off, especially the more audacious ones, was the drug. And eventually it's like, you didn't want to do the easy ones. You had to, because you had to fill up, a half-hour show. But it's like, okay, we got smug with the easier ones because we did so many of them, and we really relished the difficult ones. And we're in situations where everyone thought we were dead. And, sometimes you get lucky and the first person, hey, that was a great take. Other times, it's getting late, it's not like you can show up the next day and do it again. This show, these rewards were short lived because the next day you had to do it again. Or if you aren't shooting that day, you had to prep for the day after with, 6 methods that weren't working yet. And yeah, so there was a sense of accomplishment when it worked, or if not accomplishment, relief. Because sometimes we're so beaten up, all of us. It was more like just a relief. Thank God. Okay, we have it. It's content that can use it in the show. Other times we had the latitude of the feeling of high five. But I'm not kidding when I say this is a difficult show. People were really, working hard, everybody, to make these things happen.
I love the way that you put it, because in my head I'm thinking, you pull off one of these big things, everyone's like, high fiving, and then let's go for drinks. But no, it's like high five. Okay, sleep for like 3.5 hours because we've got another 12.5 hour day tomorrow. That's
and
really more what
when
it's
I
like.
say high fiving, it's probably wrong to say high fiving. I don't remember much high fiving. It's more like we just got it, didn't we?
Sighs of relief.
It's more like that. We were just sort of astounded that we got it.
That's
and happy.
Awesome.
But it's more like, can we move on now? Because I'm afraid of this thing. And of course, the other half of this is when we do these, just as what you were saying, Jonah, we are challenging people's belief systems in a small way or a deep way. And when you make someone think they were a 7-year-old psychic, or make them feel that, they're just visited by a demon or Satan, and we've done all those things. Now you have to tell them that wasn't true. And that's also where, Michael's, his benevolence was perceived by the marks, and it made the show doable. Because it's not easy to say to someone, we don't want to say, ha, you weren't really psychic. That isn't the show. That is not the Carbonara effect. Ha, no, there wasn't really a demon here. No, that is not the Carbonara effect. What Michael brought to these reveals was a warmth that allowed people, some of whom were mad for a second, but they'd hug it out, and allowed the show to exist. And we've seen other shows that have a prank nature to them, where that's absent, and then it seems, wow, you're kind of manipulative to this person just for the enjoyment of people. But to walk that line and get away from "we gotcha," because that does exist. We did get them. But to get away from that sensation and to emphasize sort of this wondrous place that, they were taken to for a little while. Please don't be mad. That was a big part of the success of the show.
I'm glad you brought that up, because, you also brought up Darren Brown, and I got the chance to interview him about a year and a bit back. And one of the big questions I had for him for some of his TV specials was that exactly. A lot of the time, some of the people that went through these specials thought there was a zombie apocalypse, or whatever the case may be. And just as much as we ramp them up, have to be able to ramp them down and bring them down. And, yours are a scene, but his may be like weeks and weeks and weeks and months and stuff. And I'm glad that you brought up that, Michael has to be, and all of you have to be a little bit careful with not like, psychologically damaging people and sending them off into the world, but really saying like, hey, you were on a kind of fun, pranky, magic-y show, ha ha ha, and doing that in a way that doesn't feel like you've just been fooled, you're stupid, or something like that, because that builds a lot of, hatred and things like that.
We were astonished at how skillful Michael was at, just being a winning human being, and would take some people. Look, we didn't get everyone to sign the release. We couldn't show it in the series, so they didn't sign a release afterwards. In general, that's a rule. You can't just take, video of people and then just put it on TV. In news gathering, you can do that. But we couldn't do that. Almost always, they would sign. Sometimes there are very good reasons they wouldn't sign. If a scenario involved getting them in front of our cameras because they thought it was like a job interview or something like that, maybe they don't want other people to know they're looking for work. So you expect that. Once we did a great bit in a Mexican restaurant for a couple, But the couple were having an affair. They're both with other people in their lives, and they said, we cannot be on camera. So, you go, well, there's no fix for that. There's no fix for that. So yeah, that would happen.
Wow, that's so interesting, and especially I'm thinking about like it's done, we got it, but then it's like it's done, we got it. Okay, let's hope that we let them down easy, and then they can sign it, and then they feel really good about it too. I'd love to talk a little bit more about some of the other writing projects you've done. It's funny to look at some of the things you've done and realize the overlap. When I was a kid, I was watching the Rugrats, that you were writing at the time, and which is really incredible. I'd love to hear about if there was any kind of, magical thinking that was in your mind for writing these kinds of shows. There's magic was in your life a lot. Was there any overlap or no? These are kind of separate areas.
There's the surface answer, and then there's the more, to me, interesting answer. The surface answer is, of course, there's overlap. I wrote a Rugrats where they were seeing a magician. I played the character Bob Deeney, the neighborhood magician. He couldn't even come up with a good name, Bob Deeney. That's like not even the least bit creative. So there's an overlap there. The first sitcom I wrote for was George Wendt had a show after Cheers, and I wrote a bit about a charity gambling thing taking place in a church, and we tried to find a female magician who could do some flourishes. And we couldn't, for some reason at that time. They weren't available, whoever we were looking for. And so they put me in a nun's habit. And I did Daryl's hotshot cut, which I had learned. And at that time, there weren't a lot of people doing it because this was, I believe, pre-video, pre-magic videos. But I learned it from the text, the hotshot cut, which is a great, flourish. And so I got to do it on national television in a nun's habit. So yeah, there was that kind of overlap. But for me, the true overlap is I like the process. So if it's a sitcom, generally it's a series of knots. Someone comes in with a script, and generally, not all shows work this way, but very often one writer will do a first draft, and in the production week, it gets sort of rewritten by the room. And what you find after the table read, let's say it's on Monday, is, there's a series of problems. Some story problems, a lot of joke problems. And trust me, everyone in a table read is checking off when something gets a laugh in that room full of executives, and making another mark when it's not getting a laugh. And it doesn't matter if the actor, just didn't see the line, went, and was a little late and the timing was off, didn't get a laugh, that line's probably going to change. Very often you do not survive not getting a laugh in the table read. For whatever reason, it didn't get a laugh. Anyhow, I see a series of problems, a series of knots, and then you spend a week trying to solve those problems. And there's elegant solutions and inelegant solutions. And of course, you want the best solution. It becomes a room full of writers looking for the best solution. And hopefully, in a well-run room, when whoever has that solution, there's an aha moment. Yes, that's great. And that's a fun game. It drives some people crazy. Not everyone has the temperament for that. But I realized, I love this. This is the right job for me because I love this process. And in a similar way, a magic effect, a routine, is a series of knots in the method or in putting across this beat, in the routine. And you want to successfully, untie these knots and do it in an elegant way. In magic, we see a lot of inelegant solutions. And, the really great magicians have elegant solutions and really interesting ways of, getting rid of those knots and finding ways around the hurdles or over the hurdles. So I look at the two exactly the same way. It's just the same job. Here's a situation. Here's a bucket of problems. Go at it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of exactly what you were saying earlier of, when as a magician, you look at a trick and you say, it's great up until that point, and then you have to untangle that. It's literally the same instance that you're in to look at something that it almost works but just doesn't, because of 3 reasons or 1 reason or 5 reasons, and figure out a way, explain it away, or in magic you can do some things that you can't in TV, and in TV you can do some things that you can't in magic. But those sound very, very similar, those two.
And I love the process. I mean, I really enjoy performing, but I love the process. I used to do the Magic Castle more than I do now. And so I'd open up my briefcase and I'd see the same effects. And you guys again. I like the process. I like coming up with something. I just enjoy it. And I used to beat myself up about that. It's like, it's not something that a professional needs. If I was a professional magician, I would want my 5 minutes, my 10 minutes, my 20 minutes, my 45 minutes, and my hour. These are my sets. And each one, I want to be just as killer great as it can possibly be. And then that's what I need to be. But I've always had a restlessness. And again, it goes counter to being a professional magician. But I finally stopped beating myself up about it. I said, I'm allowed to enjoy what I enjoy. In comedy and in TV, it's understood there's people that love writing material. In magic, it's not really understood the same way or appreciated the same way. And, I had to come to terms with that I'm going to like doing something that isn't really a thing in magic. Coming up with material is, in magic, it's a different sort of thing. It's like, I love performers. I love performing. I really appreciate great performances. But in magic, this is the thing, unless you're a performer, then blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't know until you're a performer. You go, well, okay, it's just sort of the way it is. But in music, there are songwriters. No one says, unless you're singing the song. Well, no, you're allowed to be a songwriter. It's an accepted, craft. There are playwrights, and some playwrights are actors too. But no one said, you can't just be a playwright. You have to be on stage saying the words. Like, you know what? There's such a thing as a playwright. And in magic, the thing I like the most, writing material isn't really a thing. Some people appreciate it, some people don't. Some whatever. It's different. I think it may change, maybe not in my lifetime. But what I love about magic, and one thing it gives me that TV never gives me, is a lottery. I've written, like most TV writers, written for a lot of shows that are like, a few shows that are really good. But, on a scale, the bad ones greatly outweigh the really good ones. And even on the really good ones, are they going to be watching those in 20 years? I don't think so. I'd say almost nobody will be watching those shows. A few people. But in magic, this is lottery. Maybe I'll come up with a trick, a routine, a couple of things where after I'm gone, you know what? People are still going to do that. And I love being in that lottery. I love it because TV is so transitory. And magic, sometimes things, they gain a certain traction, and it's fun, writing to that. Can I come up with something that's going to end up, sort of in the world of magic? And it may not happen, but I like the lottery.
It's a lot like what you were saying before about how there's magicians, how we know that, when that person made a change, it made such a big difference since that point, or, that big addition, we really know when we really remember it. It's a really great lead into my next question, which is you've written 4 books and a lot about not only tricks, incredible tricks, but also ways to, look at magic, like literally approaching magic, ways to actually, make magic, to write magic, things like that. And you just mentioned now this lottery of hopefully being remembered. So let me ask, what in terms of, not maybe a method or a trick, but what in terms of approaching magic would you love for magicians to take home, from you? What piece would be the best?
I'm not saying this just because I have a book with this title, but to me, the great thing about, you said Fool Us is a great show. I think it's a great show too. The reason I like it so much is I think it's instructive to the audience, meaning America, that magic isn't just something you get on a shelf. It's something you pour yourself into if you're any good at all. And you have ideas and presentational, angles that are unique to yourself. And you've taken this, and like a singer with a song, you've interpreted it. Interpretation is something that I think is the subtext of Fool Us. And that's why I particularly enjoy the show. So when I talk about approaching magic or think about approaching magic, it's always from a place of interpretation, which, again, with the other arts, is assumed. It's not questioned. We know when we're going to see a singer that the singer's interpreting. No one says, honey, put on your best dress, because we're going to see the singer that's the same as every other singer. You don't go even to an athletic event to be excited about seeing the team that's like every team. You don't go to a dance to see people dance like everyone dances. Everything that excites us, that we're going to see, is exciting us because we're looking forward to interpretation. But magic, has suffered because it became very secret-oriented, secret-centric. And even to some magicians, it was all about, here's the secret. And it turns out that the secrets have a great value and, also come with great potential potholes. For example, zigzag, Harbin's brilliant illusion, one of the great illusions of all time. And it, made people like sit up straight and notice. But when every magician started buying a zigzag because they knew they could do it anywhere, it became, the rubber stamp of a hack magician. So even one of the greatest illusions ever created starts to lack interpretation. That became the worst possible thing you could do. It's like every magician's the guy with the box. So there is no sense of interpretation. But when people do start to interpret, and no one's confusing David Blaine with David Copperfield. You might like one more than the other, but no one's confusing the two. Why? Because they're interpreting magic. Penn and Teller, Darren Brown, they're interpreting magic. We are seeing, what these artists are bringing to this thing called magic, just like we're seeing what a singer brings to a thing called music. So the one thing I think is most important for anyone approaching, thinking about magic is, what's my interpretation of this? What am I bringing to this? Why is it different? And in the books, I attend to that in a very nuts and bolts way. It's not a lot of theory. It's like, okay, start here, do this. And the example I give in my books is my version of the ambitious card is called the puppy trick, because instead of a signature, I have them draw a puppy. Not a particularly brilliant idea. It's a one-word idea. I'll try a puppy, see what happens. And that trick became very instructive to me because everything changed. Everything changed. Everything about that trick that was the ambitious card changed. First of all, it became the puppy trick. I've never heard anyone in all the years of the Magic Castle, I never heard like the audience members talk in the lobby about, oh, did you see the trick where the card came up to the top? No, I've never heard that said. Yeah, everyone was doing the ambitious card. But when I started doing the puppy trick, which, by the way, not even an original idea. Tony Picasso found a book in the library written from God knows when, I think translated from a foreign language, that actually said, or you could address the card as if it were a pet, like a dog or goat. It actually said or goat. Who wrote this? So it wasn't even an original idea because it was an old book. But as I say, when I started doing it, the puppy trick, I started hearing people, around the bars saying, oh, do you see the puppy trick? Oh, don't tell them yet. They're talking about the puppy trick. What else changed? Well, that trick used to have a stage that was exactly 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. that was my stage of the ambitious card before I did the puppy trick. When I started having this person draw a puppy, then that person draw a puppy, all of a sudden the trick went all the way from the back of her head over me to the back of his head. And now the trick's in this stage. It's just taking up all this space. That was a big difference. What else was different? Well, the ambitious card trick was a trick about me. Look at me make it come to the top. Now I'm making it come to the top again and again. And the puppy trick was nothing about me. It was about her calling to her puppy. Oh, it came to the top. Now you call to your puppy. Oh, it's her puppy. It's not coming to the top. You have to draw your own puppy. Ooh. And it wasn't about me at all. That fundamentally changed. One thing after another changed. And it was all, as I say, kind of a surprise to me because I started with one word. What if I make it a puppy? Everything about that trick changed. And what did I do? Well, I interpreted it, but hopefully the books, demystify the idea of interpretation because most people think, oh, you have to sit and write a script like this. Well, you could if you want to, but in the case of the puppy trick, it was just one word. It was just one word. And then following that word and saying, okay, well, let the idea of a puppy be the God and let's follow that and see where it takes us. So, yeah, I try to, in the books, make it seem, simple, not an onerous feeling about interpreting, but certainly I try to create a sense of urgency about the need to interpret.
I love the way that you just described it, about you're taking a trick and all of a sudden you had the idea of puppy and that all of the bits that came out of it now don't come from you looking anywhere else. You don't have to look to other magicians. You don't have to look anywhere else aside from this, marriage, this concept that you have interpreted the trick. Oh, that reminds me of, or that is like, or that relates to, or that. And just by looking through that lens, all of a sudden, you start coming up with all of the answers. You start making a trick creative, and it happens by, putting that lens over a trick. And just like you said, interpreting it, right? Saying, what is this to me? And I always used to struggle with this because I also, a lot of magicians put it like, what unique thing do you have to say? What special thing do you have to say? And I was like, well, it's 20 something. I don't know. I don't have anything special to say. I don't have anything that anybody in the world needs to know. But I think the way that you just said it, which is a little different, which is not, I don't need to have anything that people need to hear, the government this, the world that doesn't mean to be things that people need to hear. It just needs to be what it's like, what it's about to me, and letting that, mind map sort of unpack itself and help guide me through the whole trick. I really like that. You have, published a lot of books, published a lot of tricks, and made a lot of magic. And the world of magic education has changed a lot. And I know in lectures and things, you've just shared a lot of magic with the world. I'd love some of your thoughts on magic education, from being at, Rubens jamming with magicians, to books, to videos, to, the way that some magic is being released right now. I'd love your opinion on young people getting into magic, what they should be thinking about, magic education and how they should be educating themselves right now.
I think it's super important when you get into magic to start identifying what for you seems like a good trick, because you can work very hard to do a bad trick. So I think the first thing, through all the clutter and all this and that, find something that seems cool, because I think most of us are energized by things that look cool. I remember seeing Jeff Justice. I mentioned him being at the Magic Townhouse. He performed Maxi Twist. Maxi Twist, I believe it's a Roger Smith plot. That's a twisting the aces effect, where at the end they changed to ace 2 3 4. I'd never seen that plot, and man, that's a great card trick. And at least with a feeling of, damn, I want to do that. And find those tricks that say that to you, because there's no substitute for that enthusiasm. And you want to be sparked by that enthusiasm, because your enthusiasm for that effect will be, a driving force to learn the sleights, to learn how to put over, the beats of the effect, and put together this thing, which, depending on the trick, might be easy or difficult. We all see magicians do the same plot. One's getting people screaming, the other gets nothing. One people can't believe what just happened. The other audience doesn't really understand what happened, but it's allegedly the same trick. Well, that's what's interesting about magic, right? Why is it this happening when one person does it, and that happens when someone else does it? And you start to analyze it, and you start to go, well, what's going on? Well, they're laughing here, they're surprised there, and you just look at it and try and, plan a course for your own performance of this effect. And when you have intent, well, let me first close that. Discover what is a good effect for you, an exciting effect for you, something that makes you want to do it. That's number one. Number two, when you have that, and we'll have different reasons why we want to do a different trick, or different reasons why one's just attractive to us, why one excites us. When we have that, maintain that enthusiasm. There's a reason you loved it. Now, imagine yourself doing it. And what are the beats of that effect? Well, first I'm going to come out and I'm going to say, well, say what? What are you doing a demonstration of? Or is this something that you're going to say, it's something I found in a thrift store. I don't know why it works, but it does. Oh, here's something that you can do if I give you the power. Oh, here's something I learned from my grandfather. I practiced this for many years. It's the first time I'm going to do it. Let me show you. What is your premise? Because generally, people are comforted by premises. People want to know in a story what's going on. You don't have to start by saying, here's what I'm going to demonstrate. But what's your performance of this effect? What are the beats? Well, I want them to be interested here, because I'm going to say, this is something I learned in a trip to India. Remember how every patter effect started with my trip to India? But what's your premise going to be? I'm going to start here. I want them to be interested. Then I want to make them laugh, because this interesting thing leads to a joke, And what's the joke be? So now you have two pieces of intent. I want them listening to me because it's kind of interesting what I'm saying, but I want them to laugh here. Then I want them to really be following the plot of the procedure. Most effects have some procedure. Even Matrix, you have to put the coins down before they start to move. I want them to be interested in that. And then when the effects start happening, I want them to be surprised, then more surprised. And when I come to the end, I want it to be a feeling that is an escalation of what preceded it. Once you have these moments in just your mind, now you have a target, not just one target, a series of targets. And because you have intent, if you pay attention and you start, okay, here's how I plan to reach these targets. Now you can give yourself grades. Well, here I wanted them to laugh. Nobody laughed. I need something better there, something different. Because once you have intent, you can progress. Without intent, it's very difficult to progress. I don't like to use the word impossible, but without intent, very difficult to move forward. But with intent, you never lose, because if something isn't providing your intent or hasn't reached that intent, you have gained, because what you tried did not do it. So, okay, cross that off the list, change it, add to it, throw it out, or keep it, but add a something. Now there's something to do. And that, to me, is the process of so many things. Also the process of magic.
That's so helpful. The things that was bouncing through my mind when you were saying it was, when you learn an instrument, you can just randomly learn chords, or really you want to learn a song, because as soon as you have a song that you want to learn, you have chords that you'll learn to learn the song. When you're learning a language, it's the same thing. You can just flip through grammar books and get a language course. But if you have a reason why you're learning the language, a thing you're trying to do, it's all the easier to do it. You have a goal in mind. And I think that, a lot of magicians who are new in magic, who maybe, at least from my perspective, it feels like are maybe wandering aimlessly. Hey, that was cool. Hey, this is cool. Hey, this is cool. Hey, this is cool. I think that's such a great perspective, which is, when I asked it, I was thinking about, should they think about books or videos or training or this? And you just said, clear all that out of the way. You should think about what you want to do, because that's the only way that the train is going to be moving forward.
And there are shitty tricks, and you have to start to have some discernment. And I've talked to a lot of people, and they show me things they're working on. I go, well, if you want to work on this, for, the physical challenge of it, that's great, but it's kind of a shitty trick. And I'll say, here's why I think it's not a great trick. And, it's not if it's from the repertoire, I'm not making fun of them, or, I wouldn't say that if someone came up with their own effect, I'd be more judicious with my words. But if they're doing something that they learned online or that they saw in a book, I'd go, there's better tricks out there, and maybe point them to this or that. But as I say, I was very lucky in that, I was taught Vernon's Cutting the Aces at a very young age. And I got to see other magicians do very good magic. The Benson Bowl routine, I mean, that's kick-ass magic, absolutely kick-ass magic. And seeing that at an early age was very helpful to me, because I could start to see the difference. I think I have nothing but sympathy for people that see all the magic online now and are trying to figure out what a good trick is. And I'm not saying it's always the same for every person, or always the same for every, arena or venue or situation, but super important not to, spend your life unable
to discern,
identify a bad trick.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. We are nearing the end of the podcast. There's a couple of wrap-up questions for the end. This has been really, really incredible. The first of the wrap-up questions is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be a phenomenal addition to the show. So who are some magicians that come to mind that you think might be a really good addition? The two catches are, we cannot have interviewed them already, and you have to be able to put us in contact. You can't just be like, David Copperfield, because I'm trying.
Well, I don't know if I can absolutely, guarantee participation of people that I like, but Armando Lucero is such a strong performer and a very soulful guy. You should speak to him. Another person, if you haven't interviewed, who can maybe surprise you is Rocco. He's a real thinker in magic, and he does the dazzling, stand-up act, and he's very well known for that. And his persona, very what would you call it, debonair persona, but he's a very thoughtful and also philosophical magician. So those are two that come to mind.
Those are phenomenal. Thank you for that. And two people who I haven't interviewed, which is really great. The next question is about modern magic. So what's one thing in the world of magic right now that you don't like that's going on, and one thing in the world of magic right now that you do like that's going on?
Well, it's interesting you said that. What I do like, number one, is Penn and Teller's show, for the reason I told you. Magic is held back when the audience doesn't even understand what good magic is. And making the American audience understand that this is an interpretive art will go hand in hand with more artists interpreting it. To me, the deep irony in magic, and this is the bad thing and the good thing, it's sort of the same answer for both, because it's the other side of interpretation. We want to, or I shouldn't say we, it's not everyone, but very often a magician wants the foolproof trick, the perfect effect. And what screws up interpretation is there are effects that, if you just do them well, are great tricks. I mentioned Matrix, or the shadow coin version that a lot of people do. You could just have no presentational skills and do that perfectly. It's a great trick. And a lot of people think that's the goal. I want to be the best magician in the world. I'll find the greatest tricks that work every time. They work every time, and they're just great tricks. Those tricks exist. You can find tricks like that, and find one, then another, then you'll have 10 tricks, and you'll think, now I'm done. No. You've just guaranteed to be mediocre, to become mediocre. Why? Because now you're exactly as good as the other magician who has those same 10 tricks. You're exactly the same. So that, I think, is bad in magic. The fact that there's this drive to find these, iron methods, iron tricks, the super tricks. It's like, you know what? They do exist, but you'll find them and make yourself bad. That's what happened with zigzag. People found it. It was one of the greatest tricks in magic. And by gathering it as one of the tricks that can't be broken, you've become a mediocre magician. So that's bad. But what's good about shows like Fool Us is between the lines, the American audience is learning that, oh, these are people with ideas, thoughts on, what a trick might be, what the plot of a trick might be, and ways to accomplish this that are different. Because look, Penn and Teller know everything, but they didn't know this. And it's, on one level, just a game show convention. Oh, look, they got fooled, they won. But on a deeper level, it's instructive. It's telling the audience, these are people with ideas. These are artists with presentations. And that's fantastic. So, yes, what's bad is everyone thinking the next method is going to make the next great magician. That's bad, but I think it'll always exist. And what's great about magic is we have it now in the mainstream in a lot of ways. With good magic in Las Vegas has continued to flourish, and it goes from the Magic Dragon Pip to David Copperfield. Very different types of magic, with other people in between. So people are seeing a spectrum of magic on big stages, both live stages and broadcasting stages. A lot of very different magic. And for that reason, I think we're going through a real renaissance where, it went from, in my lifetime, magicians finally being, denigrated to such a low point on the showbiz hierarchy that it's like, well, we need a magician. Just get a magician. It's going to be X number of dollars per week. We'll get a magician. That's about as low as you can go on the artistic scale to just be a magician. Two, Ricky Jay performing in a theater where the creme de la creme are rushing to see this, this gentleman who has thoughts in his head and ideas to share and is extraordinarily skillful at this wonderful ancient, art/craft. Derek Delgadio working both coasts with a beautiful show that's amazing people and letting everyone know that, wow, this thing called magic can encompass so much. All this stuff is happening in our lifetime, and it has a cumulative effect, and it is affecting change.
It's amazing the way you describe that because, really in my lifetime, it was the same. I remember as a kid, I was nauseated that every person would ask me about Chris Angel. Like, it was just nauseating that every person would ask me about David Blaine and Chris Angel. And it wasn't that...
Well, yeah, when they have specials too, yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't that I didn't have anything to say about it. It was just that I just felt like I know everything about magic and you guys see this weird little slice and I don't want to talk about that anymore. And now it's completely different. Now people talk about, Fool Us. People actually have favorite magicians that they know by name. My goodness,
Yeah.
On that show. And one of the things that I've just been thinking about that happens so often is, they're like these young people, young girls, young boys who get on Fool Us and they're like, I auditioned because I saw the show. I saw the show for the first time. And that is like the perfect version of what you're talking about, which is someone seeing this and going, oh my gosh, look at this texture that magic is. Not, I want to grow up to be David Copperfield, but, all the people that I interviewed told me that they wanted to grow up to be, Doug Henning, or David Copperfield. And now that doesn't happen. Now I think people are able to see, oh my gosh, look at these magicians. I want to be able to make and do. And I think younger magicians now are more encouraged to like play and make and interpret, just like you're talking about. I really love that.
Yeah, and there's a real sense of joy in that show too, where people are, I'll compare it to a talent show. I have two kids. Now they're young adults. When they were kids, they'd be in the talent show at school. And everyone goes up and does 5 minutes, does their talent. And of course, I love seeing my own kids, but it was thrilling seeing all the kids because self-expression is really the most human thing we can do. And And Fool Us is kind of like a talent show in that respect. Everyone's going up there and going, well, this is me. I'm going to bring something to this party and see what you guys think. More than just the winning and losing of did I fool them? There's a sense, at least when I watch the show, I feel that kind of joy and real humanity that's part of, I'm putting myself here with something I'm giving you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And hopefully, you'll respond to it. And whether you fool them or you don't fool them, that always exists.
And it's such a like positive and respectful exchange about magic right now in the public that it's really, really, really amazing. 2 questions left. The second last is the take home point. So we've been talking about magic for an hour plus now, a ton of different things.
I have no take home points.
Well, I'll make it simple.
I'm known as the no take home point magician.
What's the one thing that you hope people who've listened to this while they're...
My license plate frame, it says no take home points.
Well, this is going to be hard. This is going to be... No, well, what's the one thing that you hope, magicians take home from this episode, from this conversation? What's the one thing that you really hope that magicians take and run with?
Just what we were talking about. Make sure that when you've done all the other work, you have a secret you like and you can execute the secret, that you're putting an idea of your own into it, even if it's the tiniest thing. It can be a one-word thing, but that's really what it's all about. You enjoy performing much, much more. And the audience, I feel, will always sense, that doesn't have to be about your life, just your connection to the material.
That's so helpful. I love what you said about if you do 7 great tricks that you found because they're great and popular and flawless, then you will be a mediocre magician. And I think that is, a real great testament to, wanting to do the opposite, to put your flavor on the things that aren't, the 10 most popular tricks, but instead, make it for you. I really love that. The last thing is plugs. Where can people find you on the internet, and where can people find some of your books?
I have a website, regalmagic.com, which is also the same site as davidregal.com. And you're welcome to come to the website. It's available to all.
Well, David, thank you so much for this episode. Thank you for joining me and having this conversation. This was really, really wonderful, and it truly means the world. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, and stay safe, and hopefully we'll get through this craziness. And I realize I don't mean to be glib when I talk about the pandemic. It's such a stress on so many people, but this is fun, and I'm glad we got to do it.
Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. As always, if you liked it, if you learned something, if it was fun, then please tell a friend. Spread the word. It means the world. You can post it on a Facebook group. You can tell your local magic club. You can even shout out the front door. As long as you tell someone, it means the world. Thanks so much for being here. I love your ears, and I'll see you next Thursday. Peace.